Our live question answer session. My name is Matthew Wenger. I am an education program manager at Steward Observatory at the University of Arizona, and I am the mentor, executive producer, whatever, for the Active Galactic Videos YouTube channel and the program that we have here. So we have two, at this point, former students who are going to be chatting with us today, and going to be talking about their experience of making this video. So first I'm going to have Aiden introduce himself, and then I will go over to Victoria.
Yeah, so my name's Aiden Gibbs, and like Matthew said, I'm a former student. I was an astronomy student working on mostly content for AGV, and I graduated, and now I'm working as a research assistant still at Steward on exoplanets.
Excellent, thank you very much. And Victoria.
Hi, I'm Victoria, and you've probably seen me here before, but I used to be a student here studying film and television, and now I am still working here at Active Galactic as a videographer, I guess, which is what I used to do, but, you know, now I'm just not a student.
But now she's like a professional at it. So anyway, as you can see, because the two of the people that were participating in creating this video are no longer students, sometimes the production timeline on these videos can be long. And for those of you who have made science communication videos or are thinking about making science communication videos, you either know this or should know that that's the way it works sometimes. Why don't, Victoria, why don't you talk a little bit about when these were filmed and how it's taken us to get this far.
Yeah, so this Women of Discovery, Ingrid's video, was filmed back in June. So I don't know if you guys caught our last live session, but we talked about how we went to California for VidCon, and while we were there, we were like, well, let's try to make some videos. There's JPL here, Caltech, and a lot of really great astronomers and researchers. So we decided it would be a good time to try to reach out to some of them. So one of our other actual current students, Melissa, she reached out to Ingrid. She had heard about some of her research, and we just set it up and whatnot.
Yeah. So that was VidCon was back in June.
Yeah, it's been more than what is that, 8 or 9 months?
Yeah.
Now?
So it's been a while. Aiden, can you talk a little bit about? So this is for Dr. Ingrid Daubar, the video that we just released last week on Tuesday,
yes,
I believe.
In honor of, it was a little early.
It was a little
early.
It
was the week of, International Women's Day. So.
Yeah, so we wanted to celebrate International Women's Day, and I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about what Ingrid does, and just remind people what the video was, talking about.
So Ingrid is a planetary scientist, and she's working at Caltech, or
JPL, yeah.
And JPL stands for
Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and her research mainly focuses on Mars missions. So I think she started out working behind the scenes on mission planning, and so she's worked on Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and with the HiRISE instrument, and then now she's working on InSight, and she's also worked on Juno, which went to Jupiter, and I think she's working on planning for a Europa mission.
Yeah, so she was at the University of Arizona, which is where we are now, and so she was working on the HiRISE mission, which is the amazing camera that is taking pictures of Mars now, as a matter of fact.
We did a whole video on it.
And
I'll
we
link
did a
to
whole,
it in the description when this
that's
is done.
Right, exactly.
She's also featured in that.
And then InSight just landed a couple of months ago, and has been I keep catching these little bits of updates. Can the two of you, talk about where are we now? So which of you wants to answer that one? Where are we now with InSight? It's been I don't know if it's been collecting data yet, but I know it's been deploying instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. InSight is kind of this Mars mission to really focus on the interior of Mars, I guess. And so it launched back in May, which was a month before we did the actual interview with Ingrid. It spent several months traveling to Mars, I guess 6 months. it landed in November successfully, and so at this point I think it's still kind of in its setting up phases. So they've deployed the seismometer to measure Mars quakes, and then I think right now they're in the process of hammering a thermal probe deep into the surface of Mars, and I heard it was stuck on a rock recently, but I don't know if that's a serious problem or just a minor setback. But so I guess probably we'll hopefully hear some exciting news from it in the next few months.
Yeah, it's neat. It's such a cool mission. They've been, I mean, as we've gotten better, humans have gotten better at landing things on Mars, we've tried more and more complex things. And so now we're deploying this seismometer, which is like two pieces. Like it has to have the seismometer and then the cover that goes over the top. And then, as you were saying, there's this temperature probe that's being hammered down. What is it, like 15 feet?
15 feet
into the ground, which is crazy for an unmanned vehicle. Like like that's on Mars.
Yeah,
that we're trying to do something that complicated is amazing.
They've also set up this kind of cool public outreach thing. I think they've set up a weather station that you can get live updates on the weather at Insight. There's you can probably Google and find it, but you can get live weather on Mars.
Oh, that's so cool. All right, so why don't we talk a little bit about the filming process? So can you talk about where we filmed, and then Victoria can talk a little bit more about that when she's fixed the camera.
Sorry about the view, guys.
Oh yeah, sorry, we're changing some settings on the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we filmed it at, I guess it wasn't the same day as we filmed the Jesse Christensen interview, but we didn't film it at Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We filmed it at Caltech. We were able to get Ingrid to make a short travel to visit us and to film it there.
Yeah, no, the grid. No, I see the grid.
So,
yeah, we're trying to get rid of the grid, so
if
we see the question, and we're not sure how to turn it off, so I apologize, but we're just going to have a grid for this one. We'll figure it out for next time.
We're using a weird setup where, like, we put the DSLR into the computer and have, like, two different systems and run it through YouTube, and I didn't know that there was no bars on it, and I can't get it off unless I turn off the stream. So
we're just going to leave it on.
Sorry, guys.
I'm sorry. So anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think maybe.
Okay, so where did you leave off?
So I was just talking about how we filmed it basically with the Jesse Christensen interview. It wasn't the same day. We had to organize it separately, but she was able to come to us.
Right, we had trouble getting, not trouble, but that summer JPL was slammed with visitors, and we had to request access to JPL super early if we wanted to get onto the grounds, and we didn't have time to do that. So how did we solve that problem?
Yeah, so JPL has a lot of like specifics when they have people film, and it was like very last minute at the point where we were going to be able to interview Ingrid. So like Aiden said, we were interviewing Jesse. I think it was the day before or 2 days before, and Jesse was when we were emailing her, setting up her interview, she's like, yeah, you guys can like totally use the like my office or like conference room across from my office. It's totally fine. And so
we filmed it at Caltech.
Yeah, we filmed it at Caltech in the same building. I forget what the exact name of it is, but we mentioned it in a prior video. And yeah, she let us use the conference room. Unfortunately, the one problem about the conference room was it was next to a giant computer server room.
Yeah.
So that was fun for sound. So that's why her audio sounds a little strange, because we had to do a lot of noise reduction in order to hear her, because we can't turn off the computer servers at Caltech, unfortunately. You'd think they would let us do that, you know?
Yeah.
Next time.
Yeah. When we're...
Do you know who we are? Please shut down all of your servers for us.
Exactly.
To reduce the noise.
Yeah. But I mean, besides that, the location was great, and the fact that like Jesse helped us out was awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you, Dr. Christensen. I'm sure you're sitting on there watching right now. can you talk a little bit about why we decided to talk to Ingrid and how we got in touch with her?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it briefly before, but our first contact to Ingrid was actually by one of our other students, Melissa. So she's involved in a lot of like geosciences and geophysics, like planetary science, and that's also obviously Ingrid's realm of research and study. So I don't remember exactly how Melissa had come across like Ingrid. But well,
I think she works for Ingrid's former supervisor.
Yeah, something
Isn't
like
that right?
that.
I think they're connected because Melissa is doing. So Melissa is another one of our undergraduate students, and she's in planetary science, and she's doing a research project, not quite a senior thesis, but doing some senior research with research groups at the planetary science or at the Kuiper.
Yeah.
Space Sciences.
Yeah, so so Melissa made the first contact with her. Jokes. And she was really excited about possibly doing an interview with us and like being featured in our Women of Discovery series. And the main reason we actually went out there also like to interview her specifically was for the MRO and like High Rise video. And then we were like, oh, well, let's try to do this Women of Discovery thing too, because Ingrid's awesome. Let's feature her. And it all kind of worked out where we had plenty of footage to make, like to feature her in High Rise and also to make a standalone video about her and her work.
Cool. And for those of you wondering when you subscribe to this channel, it may have been when we did the Tom Scott video about the Mirror Lab. And so that was Melissa and Jenny talking about making the giant monolithic mirrors. So I see some comments about when they subscribe to the channel. And so yes, we can see your questions. We are watching the chat right now over on this screen. And so if you have questions, please post them in the chat, and we will get to them.
Also, if you weren't here before, we know that there's a 3x3 grid.
Yes, our apologies.
We can't fix it.
We can't fix it right now because the way that we have our videos set up, we'd have to stop the stream and then start it back up again, and we'd have to have a new link, and it's more difficult than it's more trouble than it's worth. So unfortunately, there's a grid. But remember, again, we are a university, and this is all part of the learning process, and so we appreciate your patience, and we'll have some fun here talking about the making of science communication videos. So if you have questions, we'll try and answer the science questions if you have science questions, but primarily we're here to talk about the making of science education and communication videos. So can you both talk a little bit about the process of interviewing her? How did you conduct that interview, and how did you tease out some of the interesting aspects of her work?
Yeah, I think for both of us, it was a little bit different from the Jesse Christensen video because even though I did content, this wasn't a video that I specifically planned and researched heavily, but because of our schedule in California when we were filming it ended up being the two of us doing the interview. So, and I don't have as much background in planetary science as Melissa does, so when we went there, we had to quickly do our research and kind of use our knowledge to try to tease out the interesting questions. And
this is one of the benefits of having a diverse team. So we had Aiden, who was an astronomy student at the time, an astronomy undergraduate student, and so he has some content knowledge, and so it's it's not easy, but it's possible to transfer some of that knowledge between domains of science and to ask insightful questions. And then Victoria, a filmmaker, but also journalism. And so asking great questions and remembering the kinds of things that you need to ask people and how to ask good questions, both of those make it possible to kind of deal with things on the fly a little bit. And so as Victoria was saying, Melissa, who is our planetary science student, made this initial contact with Dr. Daubar, and we ended up meeting with her, but Melissa wasn't able to be there. So we had to facilitate it with two people who didn't know as much about her work, and so we just conducted it like an interview where you are trying to figure out, ask them lots of great questions about what they do.
Exactly.
So what are some, can you give us any sort of journalistic ideas or hints about, how to ask good questions and how to think about these things in the moment?
Well, I mean, my basic, going into an interview sort of planning is, trying to do research and, think of at least, I usually go with, 10 to 15 questions, sometimes more if we're, covering different topics in, one interview session, if we have plans for multiple videos. But, yeah, I try to go with some questions that, cover all of the basics of things, make sure that, for, Ingrid, make sure that we talk about her early education, how she got into astronomy, why she leaned toward, planetary science, and, how she became a part of all of these missions that she's worked on, things like that, that I think are really interesting. And then also talking about more of the science stuff. But, also as a journalist, I've kind of just learned to, you have your set of, 10 or 15 questions, and you go for the interview, and as you go, you're not only just, writing things down or, filming things, but you're, listening to what they're saying and, trying to think of other things from what they're bringing up that you want to, oh, can you expand on this more? Or, oh, you did this, can you talk about that? Or, when, I think Ingrid had just mentioned, Europa Clipper in passing, and I was like, that sounds really interesting, because I'm really into Europa. So I was like, can you talk more about that? Tell us about that. What's the mission timeline? What's going to be that whole setup? I didn't include a lot of that in the video just because, cut for time. But, yeah, you just kind of, I usually go into it where it's, you're just having a conversation with someone and, trying to learn about them and have them talk about the things they care about, And
I also want to point out, we've brought this up in other videos, that it's always really good to check your assumptions. And sometimes people with, a lot of domain knowledge forget to even have people explain basic acronyms, or you take for granted that you know something and you forget to ask something that a non-scientist wouldn't know. And so that's one of the things that just takes experience and kind of a little bit of metacognition, where you have to think about your own knowledge and what other people might know or not know. Mm-hmm. So we're going to take a quick question. So we're going to try and keep the questions focused on this video about Mars and Mars Insight and Dr. Dalbar and her research, and also primarily about the making of this video. So there are a couple we'll mention. Amateur Superfan is interested about the center of the galaxy and whether it has more impact on Earth. And the only ways that things in space can really interact with Earth are through light or gravity. And the center of our galaxy is really so far away that the gravitational pull of the building next door is more significant than the gravitational pull of stars and planets that are, hundreds or millions or billions of light years away. The other question is, they asked a question about what music do we listen to, and we can talk a little bit about that, but then also it accused me to talk about the music that we picked for this video. So
yeah.
I'm old, so I listen to 80s music, but I like, some newer stuff too. My wife loves classic rock, and so I listen to a lot of that. So why don't you talk about your musical interests, and then we'll go over to...
Well, listen to pretty much everything. The new pop, rap, metal. Yeah, I don't know how that relates to these videos.
I don't either. We're just trying to get to know our audience. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I listen to everything. I love, classic rock, man. Everyone's seen Bohemian Rhapsody? Not Spawn, but obviously. But I love Queen. Anyway, as far as the music for the video, if you are a frequent watcher of our channel, you would have noticed that it's the same music I actually used for the Jesse Christensen video. So I don't even know how we found it. I think it was just, like, one day I looked, and sometimes people will download things from, like, Free Music Archive and just leave it on the computer. And I found it one day, and it was Chris Zabriskie, I think. I can link to him down below. But he does so much music, and it all fits, like, really nicely with our aesthetic of, like, you know, being an astronomy channel and doing all the, like, I don't know, like, space music.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a kind of, like, space music, you know?
Yeah,
and he
there
fits
totally
that.
is.
And I thought it would be nice as a little, like, you know, cohesive thing. I know that, like, the Claire Max video did have different music, but, because it was edited by Carolyn, but I thought it would be nice to just have that similarity, you know, have that, I guess, cohesion between Jesse's and Ingrid's, especially because, like, Jesse helped us out a lot, and, like, they were in the same place, and it's all Women of Discovery, so, yeah.
Cool. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that if you watch our channel and watch the videos, you'll see that there are clips from Dr. Dalbar in multiple videos. So can you talk a little bit about that process? You mentioned that, you know, not all of the clips made it into this video. Where do they show up, and why do we do that?
Yeah, well, I think the main other video that Dr. Dalbar was featured in was the MRO and High Rise video, Long Live High Rise, I think it's called. And that was the original intention that we went to Dr. Dalbar with, is to, like, make this video. And we kind of added on the Women of Discovery part. And originally, you know, I was, like, going through the footage back in, really, like, December, when I was working on the High Rise video, and I was a little worried because I was like, I don't want too much overlap if we were to do this Women of Discovery thing. But luckily, we, you know, since she talks so much about High Rise, but we also, you know, because of like some of the questions that Melissa gave us, but also, you know, Aiden was able to think on the fly with a lot of the science stuff and knew about, like, InSight and some other things that are more detailed about her research.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to get a lot of really great information about, I mean, her as a person, but also some of the other missions she worked on, so we didn't have a lot of that overlap. There's, like, a couple notes that she hits on in both videos, but...
And then I also think that we're always working on multiple videos, and we have lots of ideas for videos that are kind of going on at the same time. So sometimes it's just targets of opportunity, and I think this was a good example of that. You know, mm-hmm. and sometimes we not invent a video, but sometimes we come up with a video that we want to do based on who we have access to.
Exactly.
Right. So I think that was. We were already doing a High Rise video though before we got to talk to Ingrid, is that right? Or do we kind of plan that after we had set up the interview with her?
I think we intended to do a video on High Rise, and, like, we're trying to get the interview in order to make the video.
Okay.
And then we got the interview with
Dr. McEwen.
Yes, Alfred.
Yeah,
McEwen.
so Dr. Alfred McEwen was another one of the interviews that we included in the High Rise video. So again, we'll put that in the description down below.
Chat's
all right.
blowing up for the first time ever. This
I
is
know,
very
right?
exciting. I don't really know what you guys are saying. I can't see it. But hopefully it's nice things.
So the next thing is kind of the practicalities. So how many people were there filming, and is that typical? And was this a good setup? What's better?
Yeah.
Can you talk about a little bit about that?
Yeah, we had 2 people. I think we intended for there to be more people showing up to film, but I don't remember what the other people had to do. But we ended up having
Yeah, it was Go to
VidCon.
VidCon.
It was VidCon. Okay, so we only had Vicky and myself, and I was a content person who, again, I hadn't really worked on this video until I showed up, and then Vicky, who was the videographer. That's kind of the bare minimum, and it's a good thing that even though I'm not a videographer, that I know how to work the camera and do the sound, because I think that was an important thing with making it efficient and having a relatively quick interview.
Yeah, it was nice. I mean, you definitely want to try to do an interview with more than one person, at least, you know, because then, like, we had a 2-camera setup, So you have the two shots of like one of Ingrid from like this angle,
Like head on.
yeah, and then one from like a profile. Yeah, and you know, you'd hopefully have two people to man cameras and like help set up and everything, or else it's gonna take a lot longer to set up and deal with everything. So yeah, good that we both had video knowledge, and also that we both come from really like different academic backgrounds. So
I think
yeah.
I think it was a good combination. It really complemented.
Yeah. And granted, it's always better to have more people, unless you're in a small room, in which case maybe not too many people. But like for the Jessie video, we had 5, and it was a little much for her tiny office, but it was nice because, you know, we had 3 extra people there who also came from different backgrounds and could continue to ask other questions.
And then the other thing I would say is that if you're making videos down the line, a lot of times you might be the only person. I've been at events where a news station sends a film crew and a videographer, and the videographer is also the interviewer. Yeah. So I think for us the biggest challenge is often the sound, because there are noisy environments, and you know, and sometimes people are so busy setting up a good shot that they, you know, kind of overlook some of the sound. And I think hopefully we can clean up our next video, but our next video is an example of where the sound environment was just very challenging.
Which is our next?
It's.
You mean the next Women of Discovery?
Yeah, the next Women of Discovery.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the next Women of Discovery video was a challenging sound environment. So somebody complimented the curtains, and I'm going to pass this over to Victoria because she's the one who found those. And talk about the making of the process of making this backdrop.
Yeah, well, I wanted a backdrop because, like, behind this, secrets, is a bookshelf full of our boss Chris Impey's books. So we thought, you know, having something cohesive would be nice. And I went to Joann's one day, and this was 50% off. And so I bought all of what they had, and then went back, because I didn't have enough, and then bought the rest of what I bought, like, most of what they had, and then I went back and bought the rest of the roll. And they were like, you really want this star stuff, don't you? And I was like, it's important. So I sewed 7 feet of fabric twice, because it's halved, and then the top thing.
Yeah, because when you go widescreen, you forget how much real estate it takes up.
So thanks. If you're looking for a background for yourself, go to Joann's. They're great. Not Spawn.
Cool. I think we're wrapping up. And if anybody else has any additional questions for us about Mars, let's see. We have one more question. What will the Martian missions bring for us here on Earth in terms of applicable knowledge? All right, so I'll start off with talking about that. I think one of the most important things about studying Mars is that without other planets, Earth is the only example of a planet that we have to understand how planets work and how life works on the surface of a terrestrial planet. And when we studied, in fact, I think it was Carl Sagan was studying Venus and figured out that the reason that Venus is hotter than Mercury is because it has this incredibly thick atmosphere, and the temperature on the surface is actually a result of the runaway greenhouse effect. And so understanding the greenhouse effect on Venus is what led us to start understanding more about climate change on our own planet. And Mars is very much the same. So when we study Mars, we are actually learning about Earth. And so the examples of how, why is it that Mars had water in the past and no longer has water? Is there the possibility for life? The other thing is that we found Martian meteorites on Earth, and so how did those get here? And where on Mars did these rock samples that made it to Earth come from, and what can we learn about the history of Mars and the history of Earth that we can then apply to the future of Mars and the future of Earth? I mean, way down the line, people are talking about terraforming Mars and living on Mars, but that's That's way down the line. But for now, it's trying to understand how terrestrial processes work, and and then potentially how other planets work. How the atmospheres of planets form and get gotten rid of. And so anyway, there's that's what we're trying to understand, and then just how geology works on planets at a planetary scale.
Yeah. I'll say InSight. So one of the instruments that InSight has is a seismometer, and with a seismometer you can tell a lot about the interior of a planet. If it's molten, what shells does it have, and the core of Earth we believe is why we have a magnetic field, that there's a molten core. So the question is, why does Mars have a weak magnetic field? What does the interior look like? And we don't really know that much. So is something about the interior of Mars the reason that it lost its atmosphere, that it doesn't have water, that it's unlivable? And that can be extended to planets outside of our solar system. Can we expect that extrasolar planets will be habitable? Will they have atmospheres? Will they have magnetic fields?
Exactly. So thank you so much for the questions. Somebody asked if they can get in contact with us. We have an email address. We will put that down in the description.
Yeah. We also,
after the video.
Yeah, we're also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I think that's all the social media. Obviously, YouTube. You can find us. That'll also be down below. But yeah.
So if you so social media is probably the best way to get in contact with us. So if you have questions for us, that'd be great. Let's see. So Victoria did a video last year about the first dogs in space, and the question was, do we think any animals can go to Mars? Right now, the answer is no, not without all kinds of special interventions. Just very much like humans. And I assume you're talking about like macroscopic organisms. I think that someday humans will probably get around to trying to bioengineer organisms that could potentially live on Mars. But first, we need to find out if there's already life on Mars before we start sending stuff there. It's already sketchy to send things to Mars and to other planets sometimes because of the risk of contamination. And some ideas that people have about life on Earth is that it's possible that life began on Mars, and then that some kind of impact launched that into space, and some of those same pieces of rock that fell to Earth could have carried organisms or at least amino acids and organic molecules. It could have triggered life on Earth. So what we don't want to do is cross-contaminate planets before we understand the planets and their ecosystems. So right now, it's possible that there's some kind of extremophile, some kind of extreme organism that lives in like very challenging conditions, in the Arctic or under the Arctic ice, or down deep sea vents or things like that could survive on Mars. But as far as macroscopic organisms go, the answer is no, and probably not for a long time. So we are wrapping up. We had half an hour, and we've gone a little bit over. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all of your questions. We are going to do these every week after the week after our video release. And you're welcome to come join us and ask questions. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of the week and enjoy the next video that we have, which is...
I think it'll be CTA, so the Cherenkov Telescope Array. We went to one of the opening of one of their telescopes.
Yeah, so this is it's a new gamma ray telescope. And so if you're curious about gamma ray telescopes and what a gamma ray telescope is and how they work and why they're interesting, next Tuesday we're releasing a video that will tell you all about that. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a great week. And now I'm just going to sit here awkwardly until we turn off the stream.